had quite a few ghostly experiences over my life, all of which have been rather benevolent, except for one that happened a few years back. I was 24, living with my mother, my sister, and my 2-year-old niece. One night, I woke up and looked up into the darkness. This thing flew down from the ceiling, straight at me with its arms out. I can still see it. It looked like a cross between a gargoyle and an alien. It looked so evil. It sounds silly, but I was so terrified that I ran out of my room screaming into the living room to be with my mother. I was shaking uncontrollably, and I sat with her for quite a while before I could convince myself that it was just a dream, and I went back to bed with no further problems. Well, a few months down the road, my sister was at home with her friend, Kelly, who seems to have some sort of connection with the paranormal, like her mother, and she sent her down the hall to get a towel for my niece. The linen closet is down the hall in my mother's room. Kelly came back a couple minutes later, white as a sheet. Now, my sister and Kelly are always talking about stuff like this, but this is what really freaked me out. She said that there was something in my mother's room, and it was a threatening presence. She then went on to describe it. About 3 foot tall, gray, kind of a cross between a gargoyle and something. I'd never mentioned anything to my sister, and the only thing I had told my mother is that something scared me. I'd never described what I saw to anyone. In another related incident, prior to my sighting, my mother was trying to sleep one night in her room, and as she is about to fall asleep, something breathed near her, kind of like a sharp exhale, right into her ear. She woke up the next morning with scratches in the middle of her back, and the freaky thing is, she slept alone, and there were only 3, long, about 6 inches thin, scratches on her back. Needless to say, I'm very happy to be out of the house. I'm not sure if this qualifies as a ghost story, but it was more than an ordinary dream. My cat Johnny, my sweet silver bad boy for 10 years, died at home of aggressive cancer in March. During the month between his diagnosis and his death, I showered him with even more attention than usual, so by the time he passed away, we were closer than ever. On several occasions, including at his grave just before burying him, I invited him to come back and let me know he was okay. A few nights after his death, I was aroused by a dream by the sound of Johnny's meow, coming from the direction of his special spot at the foot of my bed. Coincidentally, his grave is about 30 feet further in the same direction. I waited with a mixture of hope and anxiety to feel him walking up my body to my face, but it didn't happen. Instead, I became aware of something tickling my left ear and tried to reach over to pet him, only to find that I was paralyzed. That's when I panicked, remembering all the scary ghost stories involving a period of paralysis. That was the moment where I woke up, and I suddenly saw something in the corner of the room. It was a dark, small figure, but I couldn't really make it out. It was a dark shadow, even though it was a very dark outline of something. I'm assuming it was a kid or something. It was very terrifying. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like 2 Grim Reapers were standing right behind him. So this humanoid ghost, this figure, this creature, this child, was hunched over and was absolutely mortified himself. And these Grim Reaper type ghosts came to take him away. And just like that, within seconds, they were all gone. I guess you can say that my cat didn't return. In fact, I think a demon actually returned. But I guess that's up for debate. Thanks for listening. After you read this experience, you might think I'm crazy or something, but believe me, it was the most terrifying night in my life, and it has taken me a lot of time to get over it. Before I moved out, about a year ago, I lived in a 100-year-old house. It had 2 floors, and my family only lived on the top floor. We barely ever went into the basement, because the floors were all rock, and there were no lights down there. One day, when I was about 15, I had a friend sleep over, and we thought it would be cool if we slept in the basement and told ghost stories. We gathered up our sleeping bags and our candles and went down to the basement. As soon as I entered the room we were going to sleep in, I immediately felt as if we were being watched, and I told my friend that I thought we should maybe sleep upstairs. She just told me to quit being a wimp and to set up my sleeping bag. As soon as we stayed up and talked and laughed, we never did tell ghost stories. I felt more comfortable and fell asleep easily. In the middle of the night, I remember this so clearly because this scared the crap out of me so bad, and I'm absolutely positive I wasn't dreaming. I woke up to knocking coming from one side of the house, and slowly getting louder and closer, and right when it was so near that it was shaking the ground, there was a big crash, and it went away. I sat up straight in my sleeping bag, and my whole body was trembling. After I calmed down a bit, a figure appeared at the foot of my sleeping bag, and I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything. The figure was of a man dressed in rags that were covered in coal. He stared at me as if he recognized me from somewhere, and then his eyes widened, and he exclaimed with a gasp, "Mary Beth, Mary Beth, help me." He then disappeared with a flash of light. Apparently, my friend had woken up right when he disappeared and saw the flash of light. The next day I told my parents, and they said that they had felt a presence down in the basement earlier. I read up on the history of our house, and found out that the mistress of the house was named Mary Beth, and her picture resembled myself. One of her servants had been trapped in the basement and tried to climb out of the coal chute without succeeding, and after being trapped for about 3 days, he died in an unexplained fire accident while in the basement. Thank you for taking your time to read this. Hello, I have another ghost experience for you. In March of 1994, my husband, my oldest daughter, and we visited Venice. We booked a room at the ancient Palazzo. We were assigned a room on the 2nd floor, overlooking a canal. The view was accessed by opening the heavy wooden shutters, which opened into the room. These had a metal rod, which fit into a U-shaped hook on the other window. Opening out were double windows, also heavy, with numerous panes of glass. This room had double beds, with a narrow walkway between them. About 3 times during our 2 days there, we would hear footsteps start from approximately the middle of the room, march smartly over to the windows, at which point the wooden shutters would fly open. We would track this phenomenon with our eyes, but saw nothing and felt no fear. The first time we rushed over to the windows to check them, these shutters were so heavy that it felt doubtful that a gust of wind was blowing them open. What's more interesting is that the glass pane windows remained shut and seemed pretty airtight. The catch was not all that easy to work, either. My daughter, then 14, remembers having to struggle with it to open it. Even my oh-so-logical and mechanical husband looked over the shutters and could come up with no good explanation. The last night we were there, we retired for the night with my husband and I in one bed, and my daughter in the other. She and I could hold hands in the space between the beds. They were so close together. Right after lights out, we heard the footsteps, this time walking up between the beds to where our heads were. We could hear breathing. We were both too scared to do anything, but we certainly compared notes the next morning. I wanted to ask as we were checking out if the place was haunted, but the only folks on duty that morning didn't speak English, and we don't speak Italian, but we'll never forget the place. About 10 years ago, when I still lived in Pennsylvania, a group of friends and I took a joyride out to the Quaker Cemetery just for a good night scare. It was a chilly, full moonlit November night, and there were 6 of us there, 5 guys, and me, the only girl. It was the perfect setting for a ghost. Now, I don't know how many of your readers have ever been to this cemetery, but to describe the first time I saw the place, I screamed and just about curdled my boyfriend's blood. The crematorium scared me the most. I don't know, something about the way it looks and what it was used for. Anyway, back to that night. 2 of the guys were acting like morons and jumping all over the place and around the markers inside the cemetery. I was angry at their pure disrespect for this old place, and so I tried telling them to stop. But of course, as excited as they were getting, they wouldn't listen. Me and this other guy were too chicken to go along with them, especially because of the way they were acting. They were bound to disturb peace in the cemetery, so we stayed by the car. We kept hearing a fake bird call coming from the trees along the opposite side of the road, and then I started smelling the lilacs. The lilac scent somehow wasn't disturbing, even though it was November and none were blooming. And also, there weren't any fresh flowers placed on any of the very old graves. A fake bird call almost scared the life out of us, because it just sounded so unnatural, and with each chirp, sounded closer and closer. We decided that we really needed to get out of there, so we both sat inside the car, waiting for the others. I got myself in such a worked up state that when I found a quarter on the ground, I swore, "In blood we trust," was written on it, rather than the usual "In God we trust." My friend just laughed at me. The story that I'm about to relate to you took place when I was about 11 years old. I'm 17 now, and most people whom I've conversed with about this matter shrug it off as the hallucinations of a child. It was the fall of about 92 or 93, maybe before, maybe after. I do not honestly remember. I was living with my father here in Texas at the time, because my mother had hauled off to Arizona to take care of her father, who had succumbed to a stroke. My father and I had gone to my grandmother's house for dinner. My grandfather was out of town visiting relatives in another part of the state. My father, my grandmother, and myself were in the kitchen conversing about things that I can no longer recall, because my memories of this occasion are starting to fade and jostle in my mind. My father told me to go wash my hand in the restroom, as my grandmother had just finished making dinner, and we were about to sit and eat. I walked out of the kitchen and into the dining room. As I looked in the general direction of the restroom, which was about 15 feet from where I was standing, I noticed 2 things immediately. The toilet was making strange noises, which isn't uncommon in houses, and there was what appeared to be a man in a shroud, standing in the restroom, with his hands under the faucet, staring at me. I don't remember exactly what my feeling was at the time, except for a bit of fear and a bit of awe at the supernatural. I'm a big reader, and around that time in my life, I was getting into ghost stories and other paranormal phenomena. I then walked back into the kitchen, and my father asked me if I'd washed my hands. Of course, being as frightened as I suppose I was, I told him that I had, and then I proceeded to eat my dinner. But the events of that night have never entirely left me. I had seen the man in the cloak on at least 2 other occasions since, But those stories are for a later time. Thanks for reading, and good night. This story was told to me by an ex-boyfriend, Mike, when we first started dating. We were still getting to know each other, so when he told me he was very afraid of spirits, I believed him, because it's not the type of thing you'd say if you were trying to impress a girl. I asked him why, and this is what he told me. Mike's first encounter with ghosts was about 10 to 12 years ago, when he and his family, mom, dad, little brother George and Mike, were living in a house in the northwest side of Chicago. This particular house had an attic, which was used to store the items that came with the house when before Mike's family bought it. Nothing too unusual, mostly furniture and such. At this time, Mike was probably 15 years old, and his brother George was probably 9 years old. They were up in the attic one afternoon, goofing around, pretending to be acrobats and wrestlers. Eventually, they got tired, and George collapsed on the floor, while Mike sat in the old recliner that came with the house. The brothers continued talking until their mother called from downstairs, announcing that dinner was ready. The boys had worked up an appetite, so they bolted out of the attic. Mike was the last one out, and as soon as he shut the door behind him, he remembered that he left the light on. Knowing his mother would be mad if he didn't turn it off, Mike opened the door to the attic, took one step in, and froze. The recliner that Mike had been sitting in was slowly turning towards him. Mike tried to command his body to run, but he was so scared he seemed rooted to the floor. The recliner turned enough so that Mike could see the form of a knee, and it was at that point that Mike got the strength to bolt out of the room and down to the kitchen. He told his parents what he saw, and of course they didn't believe him, but Mike refused to stay in the house any longer. He was so upset that his parents made arrangements for him to sleep at his aunt and uncle's house that night. Furthermore, this was the last time Mike ever stepped foot into the house. He stayed with his aunt and uncle until his family sold the house a few months later. Of course, his parents objected to his imposing on his relatives' hospitality, but they were too afraid to force him to come back, fearing he would have some sort of breakdown. The next house Mike's family moved into was still in Chicago, and not too far from the old house. Everything was going fine until one night, when Mike's family had friends over for dinner. After dinner, the adults and Mike sat around the island in the kitchen, having coffee and talking, while year-old George played outside in the backyard with the guest's little boy, Sam. At one point, George opened the kitchen door and ran through the kitchen, past all the adults, and straight into the adjoining bathroom. Nobody thought anything of this until about 10 minutes later, when Mike's dad questioned why George was taking so long in the bathroom. Mike's dad knocked on the bathroom door, asking George if everything was all right. No answer. Mike's dad tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. Everyone started getting concerned until the kitchen door opened again, and in came George and Sam. Mike's father asked George how he snuck back out of the bathroom without anyone seeing him. You see, there is no other way out of the bathroom. If George came out, or even opened the door, he would have been seen. In order to get back outside, he would have had to go through the kitchen again. George swore up and down that he had not been to the bathroom at all. He was outside playing with Sam the whole entire time. Mike's father asked him again to explain about the locked bathroom door, but when they checked it again, it was not locked. There were other strange incidents that happened in the house, mostly to Mike, more than anyone else in the family. The last incident Mike told me about was something that happened to him a few months before we met, when he was about 22 years old. One night, as Mike was laying in bed, he woke up with an uneasy feeling. He was lying on his side facing the wall, and he felt as if someone was staring at him. It was the middle of the night and pitch black in the room. Mike turned over and opened his eyes and saw a black figure standing next to his bed, staring down at him. Mike shut his eyes and screamed for his mother repeatedly. When she came storming in the room, Mike told her what had happened. It seemed as if such occurrence happened sporadically. Strangely enough, when Mike was getting to the point of forgetting them. Seems as if the spooks recognize this and remind them of their presence every now and again. I was kind of skeptical when Mike told me the story, mainly because I was just getting to know him. I couldn't tell if he was a habitual liar or something, but the way he acted and the way he told me the stories was enough to make me wonder if he was a spook magnet. We only dated a couple of months, and maybe that was for the best. Hey Phantom of Darknesses, it's Phantoms. Wait, what did I say? Anyway guys, I'm so sorry for the long awaited video for you guys to listen to. I don't know when this video is going to go up. I currently don't have any Wi-Fi and I'm trying to find a place that actually has Wi-Fi and actually will upload my video because, I'm in the middle of nowhere. Well, not really, but I just moved and I'm trying to situate myself and I still have to get Wi-Fi connected, and apparently there are people who came over, they didn't get my Wi-Fi connected because I can't have a hole in my house and all this good stuff, so we're going to have to reschedule. I don't know what I'm talking about, guys. Seriously though, thank you guys. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You guys are wonderful people. I'm so thankful that I got a video out to you guys whenever you're going to listen to this. I don't know. I'm just hoping that it gets, this weekend out. So if I can actually slur my words and actually talk to you guys in a way that actually is incoherent, maybe I've done you justice. I don't know what I'm talking about. I still don't know. I never know what I'm talking about, guys. I'm just anxious because I want that video to get out. This video I'm talking about. But we'll stop. Anyway, guys, no, seriously. Thank you again. Comment, like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. We'll see. I mean, hopefully. I want to exist on YouTube, so sorry for the long awaited wait, but, when you're moving, you got things to do. It never works out exactly how you want it. Love you guys. See you in the next video. I know I just said that, but I'm a broken record, and that's how I roll. Bye-bye.